technologies that will cut out classical fluoride, sodium fluoride with a secondary filter. Because sodium fluoride and its derivatives are so incredibly tiny, some of it still gets through, so you've got to add a secondary fluoride filter onto it, which still doesn't cut out some types of fluoride. Ladies and gentlemen, ProPure for 2 years has been quietly developing this with scientists and engineers. It was designed in the U.S. They only have factories that can make this in England. So it's made in England, and this is the only filter that not only cuts out the other bad contaminants and also the fluoride in one step, it cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the system you need to add to all of the ProPure systems that you've gotten from InfoWarsStore.com. Folks, the reason I keep talking about since yesterday, this peers pressure article that came out January 21st, I didn't see till the 24th, is that I haven't had time to read it on air yet. And it says, yeah, we're getting rid of America, we're getting rid of sovereignty, you know, we're going under globalization, new world order, and the gun owners are going to have to turn their guns in. And, you know, the communist Chinese, thank God other governments are going to help. I mean, it's everything I saw in the Weatherman trials, going back and seeing the old footage where they plan to bring in the Chinese and all this. And it sounds crazy. Here we are 30, 40 years later, and they're really going to try it. I mean, and I believe they're going to fail, but there's going to be a civil war. Ron Paul agreed last week with us on air. Countless others, every analyst I talked to. Let me ask you that, Dr. Corsi, best-selling author here in studio with us. How are things going for them? They're teamed up with China. That much is clear. Do you think they're able to actually execute this? How do we defeat them? What is the time frame?
Well, first of all, exposing them is critical. Like what you're doing every day is critical. The time frame is now. It's immediate. The plan to bankrupt America is it's ongoing today. Cloud pivot theory is in
$22 billion to ship General Motors overseas.
Got to read the cloud pivot theory. I wrote it out in this little ebook, and it explains you bankrupt the United States by overloading welfare with demands that welfare can never meet, including Obamacare, including, they'll take the student tuitions and forgive all those loans.
It's all designed to bankrupt.
All designed to bankrupt. China has had meetings. China wants assets. And see, the New World Order people say, well, China's the future. Why? Because China's communist, but they combine capitalism under communism in a model.
And the elites are exempt.
Then the elites are exempt. The elites get to lead a privileged life with weapons, go into any federal building. What do you find? You find armed guards. You go through metal detectors. All your property is searched. The federal government's going to be well protected, and they're going to have weapons everywhere, but they're going to take our weapons because China does not want to take over the United States with an armed citizen.
It's unbelievable. And they're planning to just have a slow-motion Red Dawn with all the info and give China tax incentives, as they've announced, in these free trade zones where no one can compete.
Look, I wrote about, you've even got Governor Perry back with Sintra, rebuilding the parts of the Trans-Texas corridor.
They have the
superhighways. They're coming back in with toll roads. They're under the radar. They signed something like $20 billion.
Everything is to bankrupt. How is it going for them?
Done incrementally, so you can't see that it's happening in little pieces. It's going well. I mean, they're well. You've got Obama reelected. They've got, you know, a socialist agenda set out. They got the Republicans on the run. What's going to stop them is the Second Amendment and the American people finally waking up and saying no. And Alex, you're playing a big role in this. Every day getting the information, we at WND, every day getting the information in front of the people, the truth. Look, I just wrote about the fact of oil. We are selling to the Chinese oil rights throughout the United States.
For nothing.
For nothing. And George W. Bush would not, remember, Unocal was going to be taken over, I think, 2005.
And that's what government land is all about, so they can just give it away.
They can give it
I remember
away.
15 years ago reading about the UN World Heritage Sites where they admitted the buffer zones, hundreds of thousands of square miles around it, was being pledged to the national debt. And who owns the debt?
China wants to manage the ports.
China
wants to manage the ports. They're managing the ports right now.
No, that's the deal. We'll use your dollars for slave goods our slaves make with suicide nets around the factories, but you give us the Long Beach and the Panama Canal and the infrastructure and the oil.
Panama Canal, China is. They're managing the
everything.
Manzanilla. They're ready to manage Los Angeles, and they want free trade zones in the United States where communist Chinese can come in and set up business.
This is a takeover.
It's a takeover. It's a step-by-step takeover. And it's happening. And our debt is giving China the leverage they need to demand assets.
And then the globalists use our military, what's left of it, as the leverage point to keep the commie Chinese in line.
We don't have to have a military. China has one.
Is it not, my king, time to spring the trap?
No, we must desecrate the soul and the flesh of the Creator's creation. The chain of life broken forever. A monument to our beauty.
Things afoot here in Texas. You know, Dr. Corsi, I'm noticing there's like a gathering in Texas. It's also happening in other states like New Hampshire, but everybody is really moving to Texas, and the globalists see Texas as the resistance to their New World Order takeover. And I know they've got to get the guns, but I think, as the founder said, you won't need the Second Amendment until they try to take it. As Thomas Jefferson said, elaborate on what you mean by the Second Amendment is going to save us, and that you were telling me during the break, people are finally starting to get it. This has been great banter we're having.
Well, I think, first of all, the broadcast you're doing, we're at W&D getting the word out. People are understanding that, they say, it's a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy. It's a conscious plan to bankrupt the United States, conscious plan to take away our freedoms. You get the Patriot Act coming in after 9/11. You get now the, terrorism is expanding, so we've got to be able to take guns away, school killings. All these fear elements end up in taking fundamental rights from the American people while we're being indebted to China. And China wants the assets. The New World Order people, communist socialists, say China's the future because China is communist, but they've figured out, the Obama people.
Well, they're really just slave masters.
Capitalism. They're slave masters.
Yeah. Communism for the slaves, palaces for the controllers.
Precisely. I mean, Obama gets, multi-million-dollar vacations.
$10 million vacations, red carpets. They're the new Hollywood.
And celebrities. And, so does Nancy Pelosi. You go to a federal building, you're going to have to go through a metal detector. Your property is going to be looked at. They're all going to be protected, the federal government, by guns and weapons. And by the way, they're not part of Obamacare. Nobody in the Senate and the House is part of Obamacare. Nobody in the Senate and the House will be part of any gun restrictions. When China comes in.
Unbelievable.
China comes in.
Unbelievable.
And the Trans-Texas Corridor was the first salvo in this. And out of it, look, China is still managing the Panama Canal. They're managing these ports in Mexico like Lazaro Cardenas and Manzanilla. China wants ports. The Bank of China has met with the federal government. They've said, we want assets now for our debt. And the Cloward-Piven theory drives this, because the Cloward-Piven, two sociologists who had a plan, they bankrupt New York in the 70s with this idea, overloading welfare, so capitalism crashes. You blame capitalism, you reconstruct socialism, let the Chinese come in and show us how to do it. The Chinese understand capitalism the way it works, and we're just being prepared for it. The discussion today in the Senate about guns is to sensitize people. Remember, same-sex marriage. 20 years ago, people were offended. Now everybody's desensitized. The same with a gun takeover. You introduce the idea, you show Newton, all these school. You want to protect the schools, put armed guards in them. That's what they do in the federal buildings. It works for the federal buildings are not no gun zones. The federal troops have, federal officers in every House and Senate building.
But how do you beat it when they've got all the illegal aliens voting and everything?
What they don't have is you've got the people in the United States, those left in America who understand that the Founding Fathers created.
We have to get aggressive and realize how much trouble we're in and go after them politically, legally. People have got to make this a full-time deal.
And take it seriously.
Yeah, this isn't a joke.
It's not a joke. I mean, this is now when, pre-prepared, all these, the census data, the data about filling out all this information.
The smart meters watching everything you're doing.
They're collecting data right now to know where everything is. So when they come to get the guns, they all say, well, give us the one you got in that closet. You registered it. We know you've got it. Hand it over. This is where the information...
And they know when people fight back, then it'll be, oh, there's a new terrorist threat.
All we want to do is register the guns. What's wrong with that? Well, as soon as you've registered
then they take them.
They know where they
go, but you can keep your bolt action. Now Australia's banning bolt action.
Well, and again, what's an assault rifle? Well, the assault rifle is going to be anything they decide is an assault
That's why they're now saying, oh, it's handguns too we're going to ban.
Anything you want is an assault rifle. And again, the Second Amendment was designed for this very situation.
As we saw in Katrina, and as we are watching now in New York and New Jersey, the federal government can't and won't help you in a crisis. FEMA ran out of water and MREs in days. Electricity is still off to over 1 million people. The Red Cross, who is quick to beg for money, is now slow to react. Don't put it off any longer. Get prepared today. While you're on InfoWarsShop.com, check out these other great preparedness items. The Aquapod kit lets you store up to 65 gallons of water in your bathtub. The Pocket Socket provides you with manual electricity for small electronics like your cell phone. The Life Straw is great for your bug-out bag. And check out our complete line of Interfood products for great tasting and nutritionally dense foods that have a great shelf life. If you are looking to secure your home in a crisis, you can order Strategic Relocations the film, a great companion to the book Strategic Relocations 3rd edition, and The Secure Home by Joel Skousen. When the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has already passed. Get prepared now, so if a crisis strikes your home, you and your family will be secure. Go to InfoWarsShop.com.
We've got Dr. Jerome Corsi here with us for another 25 minutes or so, and then he's got to leave and get on an airplane. Again, he is a PhD from Harvard University in political science. Worked with the State Department and other agencies in highly classified areas as a consultant. And, of course, has written 5 New York Times best-selling nonfiction books, many of them #1. And he writes for WorldNet Daily, and he's got a bunch of ebooks out right now. And yes, there are a lot of different sociologists, and that's how communists operate during the infiltration phase, is they want to bankrupt things, then blame free market, and they get so many dependent they can take over. Now, Doc, we've had great banner. Everybody's saying, powerful radio earlier, but I want to be able to now just sit back and have you recap everything you've said, that this is the global mega banks, anti-free market with the socialists and the communists. To recap last hour, leveraging with the communist Chinese, using limited capitalism where they exempt themselves from the rules, basically modern slavery, to take over, and how we beat them and what we're facing and how they use the drugs, how the big banks are behind that. You wanted to talk about that. I'm going to just sit back now. You've got the floor.
Well, I mean, there's so many. First of all, I want to start out with the Second Amendment. I want to say this about the Second Amendment. Second Amendment was written for a time like this. It was written for a time... Revolutionary War, it was when the British were taking everything over, British making a final play to dominate the colonies. And the militias then at that point, people being armed, were critical. An armed public today, Second Amendment is a powerful tool. It's why it's being attacked. It's critical to maintain. Now, the next thing I want to say is, look, and Alex, we are the drug cartels. The government of the United States, you got the NSA, which is reading everybody's emails. Now, you mean to say, and I showed and published with John Cruz, the whistleblower, the information about HSBC money laundering money coming from the drug cartels. That has to happen with the U.S. government knowing about it. You mean Treasury, Federal Reserve, NSA, CIA didn't know that Mexican drug launderers were driving into Tijuana with a truckload of $100 bills, sitting in the high net worth area, drinking espresso while that's being processed into the bank and shoveled all over the world on behalf of the drug cartels. We facilitated that.
I've talked to the Air Force and Army officers who sit there with the surveillance blimps and the aircraft, and they're told, let that through, let that, stop that.
Why do we have more heroin coming out of Afghanistan today than when the Taliban ran Afghanistan? Again, we are the drug cartels. We are the gun runners of the world. Fast and Furious was just the tip of the iceberg.